Leslie Wright. I'm the director, and it's my great pleasure tonight to introduce our speakers. He's be speaking about the recently acquired portfolio of prints called Life of Toussaint L'Ouverture by the African-American artist Jacob Lawrence. So let me first introduce Patricia Moyes. She is a relatively newcomer to the Grinnell community. Her official title is quite long and wonderful. She's the Clear Mellon Post-Doctoral Fellow in Data Curation for Haitian Visual Arts. She is here working on a project that brings together Grinnell College, especially the Grinnell libraries, and the Waterloo Center for the Arts. And if you don't know, the Waterloo Center for the Arts has the largest collection in the world, the largest public collection in the world of Haitian art. She will be working to make Waterloo's Haitian collection widely accessible through digital means, and also preparing to create a broader digital hub for Haitian and Caribbean studies, which is really exciting. Part of the project also includes collaboration with institutions in Haiti and to others connected in the Haitian diaspora. Dr. Moyes has her Doctor of Design in Cultural Preservation very recently from Louisiana State, and an MBA from Southeastern Louisiana University. She is herself a practicing artist, and she is an active researcher into Haitian artists as stewards of Haitian trauma and perhaps someday of Haitian triumph. I would like to say that perhaps her biggest accomplishment so far in 2021 is surviving multiple days of below zero temperatures, which I think was a brand new experience for her.
Yes.
Professor Fredo Rivera is toughing it out in Miami through the terrible winter weather. He is an art and architectural historian who has done research on the Caribbean ever since his undergraduate days right here at Grinnell College. His current research focuses on art and architecture in modern Cuba, Haitian art, photography, and the relationship of the art world and the real estate development in his hometown of Miami, Florida, which I think is really a fascinating topic. He's currently teaching a great course on contemporary Black art. His PhD is from Duke University, and he is also active as a curator and as a drag performer. And it was through his leadership that we received the NEA grant that brought together Grinnell and Waterloo and has led to Petrouchka's position here at the college. So he's also been a great partner with us and a real friend to the Museum of Art. So it's really wonderful to bring them together and bring together their expertise to tell us more about this wonderful new print series we have. And I will stop talking and turn it over to you guys.
So do we do age before beauty? Because I think I got you on both.
Okay, go ahead, Patricia.
So thank you very much, everyone, for coming out tonight and sharing this moment with us. We are very excited. Fredo and I have been talking about it over and over and over again because we know we don't have that much time, but we have a lot to say, and we're both extremely big on talking. So we wanted to kind of start to discuss as to how this collection, when did we first come across this collection in Jacob Lawrence? So Fredo, would you like to share as to what was your first experience with Jacob Lawrence?
Absolutely. So I took both art history for a year and AP art history in high school, and I imagine we discussed him. It was really when I was doing a guided reading with Jenny Anger, where I was studying African-American art, that I became very familiar, particularly with the Toussaint L'Ouverture series, and became quite fascinated by it. And by my fourth year at Grinnell, I ended up doing a thesis project looking particularly at African-American artists whose work incorporated Haiti. So this included artists who traveled to Haiti, artists who reference Haiti in their artwork, and particularly with an interest of what Haiti represented in this sort of historical moment, looking broadly it's sort of the era of the Harlem Renaissance in the mid-20th century, where Haiti became, I argued it was sort of a trope of resistance for those artists who were making art in this period. And Haiti very much became this sort of symbol of Black liberation. And the opportunity through MAP funding to travel to New Orleans during that spring break. It was an interesting time to travel to New Orleans because it was the spring break following Hurricane Katrina, when the city was very much in a state of disrepair and exile in many ways. A lot of businesses were closed. The streets were more empty than usual. At that time, the Amistad Research Center, where the original Toussaint L'Ouverture series, the 41 timber paintings are located. Fortunately, at that time, they were on display at the New Orleans Historical Society as part of an exhibition called Saint-Domingue, Louisiana. And it was looking at the colonial connections between Louisiana and Haiti historically. And they borrowed the works from the Amistad Research Center and had all 41 works on display. And for me as a researcher getting to do this map research, it was really exciting because I got to see all of the works in sequence in this exhibition setting in a way that I think Jacob Lawrence very much intended for this work to be seen in a sequential way and as a way to read and learn about the Haitian Revolution. So for me, it was super exciting to see these prints come into our collection because it took me back to earlier research that was very sort of profound in my development as an art historian. So thank you. And what about you, Petrouchka? How did you come to learn about and engage with the work of Jacob Lawrence?
Actually, I felt like I walked in his shoes because Jacob Lawrence family migrated to New York in 1938 in the 30s, and he was based in Harlem. So he was exposed to the Schomburg Institute and had wonderful artists that were forming the Harlem Renaissance at the time that influenced him greatly. And for me, my parents came from Haiti in exile in the 60s with the dictatorship of Papa Doc, Jean-Claude. I'd always grew up in libraries with my father, who's a country scholar, I want to say, and we always knew the library very well. But then I got to hear that there's a museum, a library dedicated to Black culture, and I was kind of like looking for myself. And I left Berkeley. I went to Brooklyn, went up to Harlem, and the Schomburg was such a wonderful institution that I was kind of flabbergasted that there was this one place that everything about it was cultural and Black and celebratory. And there was the image of the portrait. And then I had never seen Toussaint L'Ouverture's image before. And it was about Haiti, and it was about me. And so it was another context of me understanding myself. And I just love being at the Schomburg. But what I found that was really key was the way that they tied historical texts to art. So I want to say is one of the catalysts that made me me. So that's how I came to know his work.
Can we get to the print, The Birth of Toussaint L'Ouverture? And I know Petrouchka is particularly excited about this print, and I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts and ideas about it.
Yeah, the reason why this print and why the entire collection for me, when I got an opportunity to see it, was the fact that I started to understand just how his narrative storytelling through the arts was really, for me, a collective consciousness of leadership. It really helped me to kind of understand how Jacob Lawrence was kind of studying Toussaint L'Ouverture in the sense of how leadership is birthed. And it's not just a singular conversation, it is a collective conversation. And so for me, leadership is a collective consciousness. It's not just the individual person, but it's all the parts and pieces and the players. And he, in that first panel, when he's talking about the birth, is understanding the fact that we do understand the nature, but we also have to understand the nurturing of a game changer. And so here I see he's starting to He brings women in. He honors the mother. He honors the intimacy, the relationship that we have. So that was the first panel for me was, oh, this is the birth of a game changer. But it doesn't just happen when the person takes the action when they're in leadership. It starts from the very beginning in his nurturing, in his nature. What did this piece mean for you?
Thank you for that. I see that, and the one thing I was thinking about with this piece, that there's something very affectionate about it, and it's really interesting. We have 13 of the 15 prints Jacob Lawrence produced late in his life that were based on the series that he painted in 1938, which was 41 original ones. 41 original paintings that are in this sort of chronological sequential manner going from the moment of colonial contact with Columbus and the island of Hispaniola to Toussaint's birth, and then forward into his capture, his death, and sort of the figure of Dessalines, which is the very last 41st painting. And so I see this as sort of this very pivotal moment of affection. I'm also interested in how he represents this interior space. We see these sort of that foliage that you see in a lot of the prints sort of peeking out of the window, but we have this sort of very tight, enclosed affection, almost womb-like space. And I think one of the important things, the original works have longer titles that explicate things further. I think it speaks to the pedagogical and political value that he placed in his practice. And I also, and in the original title, it's The Birth of Toussaint L'Ouverture, May 20th, 1743. Both of Toussaint's parents were slaves. And I think that's a significant information he's putting in there in the entire title, that this is likely a representation of slave barracks, but he's showing the space in this way that really allows us to see this moment of affection and celebrate the birth of a leader in these unlikely circumstances. So I'm very interested in sort of, particularly in this one, Jacob Lawrence's construction of space.
And historically, I think that the reason for that title is also for the fact that we had a three-tier society. We had the white plantation owners, we had the people of color who were free blacks or free mulattoes, and then you had the slaves. So it's something of which where he's saying, you know what, I don't want you to attribute that maybe that this person had a mixed parentage, because as we're going to move forward and we're going to see who he became with that type of parentage, but he still moved up before he became the general, who he became as a man in society.
Really had me thinking, and Tilly, could we go to Dun Dun? Because that has me thinking of sort of what follows sequentially in the narrative in the original painting series, sort of that moment of birth to childhood where he becomes aware of the violence and horror of slavery, of the plantation system, to the sort of to the moment where he sort of within the system is able to become a coachman and have sort of a greater purview both of the political landscape and the terrain, to a scene like this where we see Toussaint actively in revolution. This is a scene from 1795 where he captures the city of Dun Dun. You could see him coming on his horseback from the right of the composition, and these figures cheering as he sort of arrives. I'm wondering what you sort of think about this print, and how, particularly, I know you're interested in sort of the depiction of women and their narrative as part of the Haitian Revolution.
So for Dun Dun is a commune that is located in Saint Raphael, which is in the northwest of Haiti. And for me, this piece represents the movement. And what struck for me was the movement for the people or the movement of the people. It started to show me the fact of his understanding of who was in this with him. And it was not just an army and civilians. And the fact of the reinforcement of the voice, the reinforcement of the celebration, and somewhere along the line for me, his posture is a little dejected because he's fatigued, I'm sure, of battle. But to have your people there to welcome you and to celebrate you and to be reinforced as to why we are doing this, why we are in this battle. And we are not in this battle alone, we are in this battle together. But it really made me start to think about for the people and of the people, especially with everything that we've just gone through. Tilly, if you could go to the Saint Mark. I don't know what the full title was for this, but what I saw was the man before the uniform. Who was Toussaint L'Ouverture before the uniform? And in his capacity, we know that throughout history that he had amassed a little fortune, not a major fortune, but he was able to be a person of means, and he was able to go within all three tiers of society and was always well respected. So for me, it indicated that leadership is well before we receive the title. It is not by what we do, it's not by what we say, it's by what we do. And it made me think about what my father always taught me. It is not what you do with your hands, it is what you do with your heart that will determine your growth. And so here we're seeing Toussaint L'Ouverture, the man. And then I started to think of where would Toussaint L'Ouverture be now in this situation? When does that time comes when we say that our comfort is becoming our discomfort? So it makes me think, for me, where was his mind at as the country started to unravel with its system of slavery, and where did he feel himself to be because he was a man of means? And we know that throughout history that he initially wrote to France for French citizenship. So there was a point where he had to make a choice. And I felt like this was showing us who he was before the celebrity of being Toussaint L'Ouverture took over.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the original series when this reference to Saint Mark is made, because in the original series, this is panel 26, and it doesn't refer to L'Ouverture as Saint Mark here. The previous print, the previous painting sort of is one of the defeating the English at Celine, where they reference General Toussaint L'Ouverture. And then this one is titled On March 24th, he captures Mirabelais. So in this context, it's still referring to him as Toussaint. So I'm interested how in the print he references Saint Mark. But when you look at the original painting series, there's two references to Saint Mark, and they're both images of Toussaint L'Ouverture planning the war. So they show him one of them has him at a table with other sort of members of the military looking at a map of Haiti. So they're showing them in sort of these moments of strategic planning, in a sense, in relation to the Haitian Revolution.
Leslie asked the question, why Saint Mark? So once you explained that, that even opened up even more for me, because of the fact that Saint Jacques Major, which is the voodoo loi, would be the spirit or the deity of battle. And so for me, it made me think of Saint Jacques Major. So that whole imagery of soldier in battle and preparation with the sword, and his metal is, his imagery is iron, right? So that's what made me think of that. The Saint Mark, the location, Saint Mark is not far from Port-au-Prince. Saint Mark had a strong military hold, and this was the beginning of guerrilla warfare, because at that point in time, everything was brigades of soldiers just marching in a field. So Toussaint L'Ouverture and all of the other Haitian leaders learned to use the mountainous area to have battle with the French and the English. So the indication of Saint Mark, for me, I don't know really why as to Saint Mark, but I do know Saint Mark, the location, and I do know that of the references of the saints to represent our voodoo deities. So let us go to deception. So for you, Fredo, what did this piece bring you to?
This piece does a lot for me. And in one sense, it's showing this moment when General Leclerc sort of deceives Toussaint and then he's captured. So it's connected to this historical event that I think is critical in the Haitian Revolution. In many ways, it's a tragic end, at least to the life of Toussaint. Jacob Lawrence shows how Dessalines sort of moves forward. And so in a way I see it in its sequence and the way he's telling the narrative, but what really gets me with this print is the really dynamic composition that's happening here. The way that the swords are sort of directed and the way he's almost seeming to try to evade them, though the capture is inevitable. And I find that very fascinating. The way his body is bent, the shoulders are at this slight diagonal as the figures are coming in. It's just a very action-filled piece that I'm wondering, and this is a very sort of initial reaction, how it's not showing capture in a conventional means and still trying to show Toussaint's sort of agency and dynamism as these forces are coming at him. It's just a compositionally very dynamic, beautiful print. What is your take on this, Petrouchka?
There's that moment of when you become woke. I was like, this is his moment of woke. Toussaint L'Ouverture in his writing, and CLR James covers this in the Black Jacobin, very much believed that in the movement, and I believe in the collective consciousness of the times, that it was not just the American Revolution or the French Revolution or the Haitian Revolution, but the whole planet was in revolution. The whole planet was in the recognition of man. And it's always interesting that from that period of time, or the 60s, if we look at all the things that was happening in the 60s and what we are experiencing now, is the recognition of man. And so this was the moment where all his writing and his presentations and everything that he thought on his side was not. And this is where he became aware of the work that he had done. So that for me historically is like, this is his moment of woke. This is his moment of woke. But the thing for me was interesting, if we can go to the march, the dynamics of this is so powerful because like I was explaining, that the three tiers that came together. So at that period of time when Toussaint L'Ouverture and the revolution started, 1/3 of the Haitian population was African, that they were just coming from Africa to Haiti. So you're talking about 1/3 of the slave population that did not have the language yet. And then you had 2/3 of those who were speaking Creole. And then you had mulattoes that were also in this battle. And for them the ability to organize, and the Haitian Revolution was just not a spark that just popped. It was 6 years of a Congress, of meeting in the night, in the wood, in the forest, of determining and deciding how the points of attack would be. But the uniformity that they had was phenomenal. It had never been seen before. So for me, this was where the ability of leadership is not just of yourself, but the way that you inspire others to have the discipline, have the commitment, have the drive and the fortitude to say, in Creole, it's freedom or death. And that is, even to this day, it is not watered down. It is the way that we feel about freedom. And so to see that he was able to unify all of these individuals to leadership, not just to follow, but to take leadership, is significant for me. And I love the way that Lawrence shows how they're walking in the thickets. They're all together, but they're in the thickets of things. And if you've ever walked in high grass, You know that this is not an easy feat. But even then, with the way that the terrain of Haiti is not kind. Beautiful, but not kind.
I'm really excited you brought up the issue of terrain. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Tilly, can you please go to Tucson at Innery? I love this image. Like when we were previously looking at it, it has the sense of movement that's patterned in a really interesting way. I also think this is an image that's depicting an event in 1802 that's within a couple months of Toussaint's capture, but this is showing a defeat in at a place called Ennery. What I find really interesting about this print is when you compare it to the original in the painting, what I love about these prints is it shows you that it's also a reinterpretation in one sense and a new representation that comes from the original series. When you look at this, the original print, it doesn't have the fiery colors in the landscape. It's more those typical different grass. He also changed the colors of the uniform and he's added these hues of blue. The reds are a little bit more vibrant than they are in the original painting. So here, I think what's interesting, because these all are prints from later in Jacob Lawrence's career and he lives a very long life. These prints are at a different scale. There's the original sort of tempera paintings are pretty small in size or small to medium, whereas these are a little bit larger. And he's playing with color in new ways later in his career to reimagine this. So that is sort of one thing that excites me. But going back to sort of what you were saying about terrain, I think this one's unusual in the prints in that the blades are reinterpreted into fire. And perhaps an interesting one to look at this one in comparison would be one like The Burning, which shows a lot of structures or on fire within a landscape. And I want to say the original title of this one was General Toussaint L'Ouverture attacked the English at Artibonite and there captured 2 towns. So it's showing the destruction that was happening as a sort of military strategy. It was sort of burn down the plantations, murder all. And in some ways, that violence is very much responding to the sort of depravity of the colonial system, of the plantation system, where any attempt at revolt or rebellion was responded to with grotesque homicide that was also put on visual display. So that this culture of violence, but also an understanding of fighting against enemies who will kill you to reinstate slavery. So the other thing I really find,
and I would also add the fact that of how long Haiti had already been in slavery. It had already 200 plus years of slavery, of a system, of the Code Noir. So it was the nothing will be left behind to rebuild this system.
And you know, a lot of figures who led slave rebellions, and there's a history of this in the Caribbean from the 17th to the 18th century. There were many attempts across different islands. There was sort of, within the colonial world, ways different people were moved to different places. If someone was captured and killed, sometimes they would be beheaded, their heads put on stakes and it put in front of the plantation to evoke fear. So I really want to get like the visuality of violence and fear in this colonial era was quite extreme.
Yes.
One good source, Victor Brown has a book looking at this in the context of Jamaica. He's a historian at Harvard. And to me, it does a good job at showing some of the visual record of this violence and the precarity that was part of sort of colonial life across the Caribbean. And not to mention sort of the arduous nature of sugar plantations and that and the processing of sugar, which also happened within the island context. The other thing I wanted to talk about with terrain that really interests me is in my Black art and visual culture class this term, we're reading a book by the author Samantha Noel called Tropical Aesthetics of Black Modernism. We read it this past week. She came into our class yesterday. It was really wonderful to talk to the author. And in the book, she's particularly looking at painting, performance in the visual arts broadly and theorizing modernity and its employment of a tropical aesthetics. And for her, tropical representation refers both to land and place, that's visually and discursively connotated in different ways. And for example, she looks at the work of Aaron Douglas, who's another major figure of the Harlem Renaissance movement, a contemporary of Jacob Lawrence, and he creates these, I would always say Art Deco inspired even images that are very aspirational, and puts in these tropical motifs within that are quite beautiful. And she's trying to theorize the meaning of this, particularly when thinking about Black modernity. And what interests me is Jacob Lawrence is doing the inverse. He's, as an African-American artist, referring to the Caribbean, but he's creating a landscape where the blades of grass aren't necessarily identifiable as tropical. It's actually pretty nondescript. It could be Haiti, but I feel like it could be somewhere else too. And I think this fits within Noelle's sort of theorization of landscape, terrain. And she's really thinking about the notion of socio-spatial liberation that happens when these Black artists rethink landscape and rethink place and rethink geography so that you could connect something like the Haitian Revolution to the context of Harlem in the 1930s and 40s. So I think this is something that's really exciting. I just wanted to share one quotation from her book because she addresses African-American artists in the Harlem Renaissance quite beautifully. She writes, African-American artists such as Jacob Lawrence, Richmond Barthé, and Aaron Douglas defied this logic. And here she's referring to the logic of the US military occupation of Haiti, which took place between 1915 and 34, as well as racism and how racism is attached to that. By portraying Haitian leaders, even fictitious ones, as found in Douglas's Emperor Jones series, so as to visualize a historical narrative created by Black people for Black people.
Yes, that's very key because of the fact that something just popped in my head. But that's what I was talking about in the very beginning, that collective consciousness of leadership. And this is that depiction of it could be anywhere. The efforts and the work that has to be done can be anywhere. And that's one of the things that I appreciated that. But when you said that by Black people, for Black people, it makes me think how Dessalines was the first one to say, we are all Black. Regardless of where you are from or the color of your skin, Black became synonymous for freedom. Blacks became synonymous for the fight. So it was like for everybody who wants to be in it, yeah. And so it made me think about the soldiers that left Napoleon's army and joined over and was part of the Haitian Revolution. And from that point on, they just recognized themselves as Black, even though they were European, because they saw the Our Lady of Chikastawa, the Black Virgin. And so they were like, these people pray to the Black Virgin, we pray to the Black Virgin. It's one united thought, you know, one united fight. But I'd like to go to preserving their freedom, to talk a little bit about how you cannot kill an idea. And this is another panel in which that you see Lawrence brings the women and include the women in the fight again. Here, we've always learned that is that in leadership, it's not the person that we are emulating, it is the idea. And it takes one soul inhabits many bodies. So here, at this point in time, Tucson is gone, but the fight still continues. And the people have indoctrinated his words and his actions and are following suit till the end. And here, what I so appreciate is the fact that the women are fighting side by side with the men. And in our history, we have always celebrated the women who have started this. And in our culture, the woman is referred to as the potomitan. And she is the center pole. She is the center pole of society. She is the center of her family. And so the potomitan is very significant, and the women and their roles are very significant. And as you were saying about the fact of the exchange of the islands, Jamaica was where if you didn't have, if you had a slave that you couldn't break, you brought them to Jamaica. And so Jamaica had very notorious ways, as well as Haiti, in trying to break the spirit. But we have Judy Bookman, who was a shaman who came over, and with Cecilia Fatima, who is a Yoruba priest, a Mombo, and they did the ceremony of Wakaima that brought all the slaves together and started the revolution. And then we have Marie-Jean Lamartiniere, who was a marksman and was in battle and won many battles with the fight. And then there's Suzanne Belair, who's known as Sanit, and she was a lieutenant in Tucson's army, and her husband was a commander, and they had the love of their soldiers and the support of their soldiers, and they were captured and were put before a firing squad. And Sanit is remembered by the fact that when they tried to put the hood over her head, she says, "I am a fighter. I will not cover my face." Stood there, and she was assassinated. But the strength of the women, I also feel that Lawrence was celebrating in these panels, because they are there from the nurture and the nature and the leadership and the development of our nation. So I do appreciate that from him, that he took the time to understand their roles as well, to depict it.
Wow, that's a beautiful point. Tilly, I know we've already gone beyond 30 minutes. I was wondering if we could do one last image. And I think it's a beautiful image to sort of move on from this point, because I do think the importance of women in the revolution, and then the narrative about the revolution in the modern context, and how male leaders often sort of stand in as fathers of the country. And I'm wondering, in one sense, what you think about that. Could we go to the General Toussaint L'Ouverture, the famous portrait? But I'm also thinking of the symbolic value of this portrait of Toussaint L'Ouverture. It's probably the most famous image from the series. And it's this profile image of Toussaint L'Ouverture. You see him gazing to the left in a contemplative stance. There is sort of this dignified grandeur to this, the costume, the sort of golden floral decorative going up, the way the hat is moving in the same direction as he is facing towards that beautiful these sort of beautiful plumes on top. I just think it's a visually stunning image. And for me, it's really interesting because Erica James, a professor of art history here in Miami, University of Miami, has written about portraits of Toussaint L'Ouverture, the history of the imagings of him, most of which are posthumous, done in the early 19th century by different printmakers. There's a lot of debates on how he sort of represented. And for me, it's really interesting because Jacob Lawrence's representation of Toussaint L'Ouverture has become one of those iconic representations, has really become this sort of beautiful symbol of the leader that's connected to a heritage of images of Toussaint L'Ouverture, images he would have seen at the Schomburg Library. So yeah, I'm wondering what you think about this very fantastic portrait, Petrouchka.
This portrait, like I said, I saw this the first time I saw this, I was, I think, 18 years old. And it was very striking because of the fact of his posture, the way he's carrying himself, that makes you want to straighten up your back and prop your shoulders. And I felt how significant was that when Lawrence did this piece, because at that time, what was the message to the Black man of how he should stand in front of Jim Crow and everything like that, and the positioning. And so for me, this was not only a message to Haiti, this was a message to all men, and I'm not excluding women, but just to all people, of the importance of the posture, the importance of the portrait, because the portrait was significance of means, of the ability to, just that side profile right there makes you think as to who are you and why should you hang your head. So for me, it was very significant to why this has been the most popular piece, because we could see ourselves in it. It is not where it is distinct with details. Anyone can be this person. Anyone can play this role. And it's not the uniform that made it. It's not it's his posture. So we went right into his posture. We're, yes, well decorated uniform, but it's his posture. It's the poise. And this how we understand leadership.
I think that's a beautiful point for maybe us. I know we've been going on for 45 minutes, so maybe to open it up, if anyone has any sort of questions or thoughts about the series.
I was saying not about the series, but I'm New Orleans native, and I have in my possession the capture that was printed at the Amistad Center here in New Orleans, and I was always attracted to his colors and even in the portrait that we just see, his skin shows off so deeply compared to the coloring that he's using in the backdrop, and just the way he used color and the way it promotes movement. It's always been enamored by the capture series with the horses, and I've got like 2 of those in my possession, and so he's always been a favorite. Just make that comment.
No, thank you. And I have that same sentiment. And I think it also, you see it in his other print series, in the famous The Great Migration series. One of my favorite is actually his Hiroshima series, which he does, I believe it's in the 60s that he does the Hiroshima series. And it has just these vibrant colors. And it's strange to say the way he's evoking horror, because he's looking at the atomic bombings, the aftermath of the atomic bombings, but the beauty and thoughtfulness that he is able to successfully convey sort of a notion of horror is spectacular.
And if you think about the stillness of this portrait compared to the movement of a lot of his other pieces, there's a dichotomy there. Because this is a very still picture, whereas a lot of his stuff, is like a lot of movement and color. And
I will add that we're actually, we still are actively looking for the 2 that we don't have. And one of the ones that we don't have is a good counterpoint to this portrait of the general. It's called Contemplation. And it's of the general. He's studying by candlelight. And it's in the same color palette, very similar color palette to this general. But it's one of the 2 that we're missing, but we are still actively looking for them. The difficulty with these prints is that they're color screen prints and they're very fragile, so they're not as easy to get in good condition. We were lucky with this set. There's the Contemplation is on the left there, and it's a beautiful counterpoint to the portrait of the general. One you have is kind of a military portrait, and then the other one is a very private kind of. I think it's interesting that it's not. It's kind of the difference to me between learning and study. There's this concept of study where you're learning something for the first time, or study where you're actually an active participant in the use of the knowledge that you're gaining, or that you're studying. But it's an interesting comparison. So we are actively looking for these last 2. The other one is on the right there, strategy. These are the 2 that we don't have. Sorry, go ahead, Fredo.
I was going to say, when I was writing my senior thesis as an undergrad, and I was able to see all 41 paintings during my research, the one that strategy is based on, which is panel 14, the Blacks were led by 3 chiefs, Jean-Francois, Biassou, and Jeannot, Toussaint serving as aide-de-camp to Biassou. This was my favorite of the paintings, of the original paintings. And I remember spending time writing about it, thinking about it closely. And it's also interesting because he's playing with color differently within this print compared to the painting, as I had mentioned in some previous examples. Yeah, so it would be amazing to get these 2 and have the complete series of prints.
They're actually, they're gettable, and they're not expensive. We're talking in the high 4 figures for each print. All 15 of them, it gets expensive, but they're not. The difficulty is finding them in good condition. If you look at the ones that we have, they're in usually good condition. Some of them do have, if you look closely, they have scuffs in them. It's just a very fragile surface, this kind of screen printing process. But we were lucky to get, and we bought them almost all at once. We actually, while we were in the process of purchasing 12 of them, the portrait of the general came available, and that's, as you've been saying, that's the most popular one and the most sought after one. And it came available at an auction house in Dallas, Texas. And so at the beginning of the pandemic last year, I bid by phone and actually we paid more than I thought we were going to pay for it, but still they are gettable. It's just a question of finding them in condition that you want. I mean, it's probably
Yeah.
easier to find them in bad condition, but as a museum that preserves these things, we want them in a condition that's actually exhibitable. Jean has asked a question: what is the particular story behind our decision to acquire them? And largely, it's due to Fredo's work. He had already expressed to us and actually pursued his interest in Haitian art while he was here, and I mean, we've always wanted works by Jacob Lawrence, and while his paintings are, for the most part, out of our reach, I mean, obviously, prints and drawings are right up our collection's alley, and this series is an obvious, perfect fit for us. And the fact that Fredo is here and able to lend his expertise to them just makes it more appropriate for us. And there are only works by Jacob Lawrence, so it's kind of a perfect fit.
And if I may add, Jean, you don't have to thank me. I think you could thank Kay Wilson. And I think Kay Wilson, who was probably aware of my senior thesis as an undergrad and was seeing the things I was doing. And I remember one day just being in the print and drawing study room and saying, what do you think if we were to get these? So it was her idea, I believe it was her idea to begin to sort of pursue this. And it does connect, I would say, not only beautifully to my research, but I really see it being something that's usable within different departments and for different classes. I think it's education, English, history. It's wonderful. I see Shavala has her hand up.
I did. Thank you. But I think we kind of moved past it, but I'll just say this. Thank you for having this. I really appreciate y'all hosting this. It's very important. Well, on a personal note, as part of my ancestry, I heard there's some New Orleans people. I am a descendant of the Creole Jean de Couleur Libre of New Orleans. So I really, really do appreciate this. And it was mentioned the general skin, and that to me was just very striking, along with not just, yes, his posture, his dignity, but I think that the just having that strong profile in for his dark skin, particularly with the revolution, particularly with the classism and the colorism and things like that, and seeing leadership. So I think that it's very important. And I think that in and of itself is also a statement to portray this man in this very stately position. So I just wanted to add that.
I think the other well, it's probably an introductory point to make, is that the reason why Jacob Lawrence did this series to begin with when he was so young, I mean, a series of, is it 41 altogether, Fredo? 41 paintings? The reason, his impetus for doing this was there were no images of Black leaders in history books, and he was essentially filling a void of this absence of Black leadership in the culture, and that was his impetus of doing this whole series, and then returning to the series later in life in printmaking. As you said. Sorry, go ahead.
He makes the comment in his interview of the fact that when he was there with the Schomburg and Augusta Savage and Charles Alston as mentors, that when he would walk through the streets, he would hear the Garveyites talking about go back to Africa, and then he would hear the communists, and then he would hear about revolution, and they would make mention of Toussaint L'Ouverture. And so these were well-spoken people who were standing on the street corners talking to the people about, let us go, and this is the Negritude movement, let us go discover and let us go celebrate. So it was very interesting for me that for him, the seed was Toussaint L'Ouverture. The seed for him was Haiti. The beginning was Haiti. So,
And I think it's very important to think about this in connection to these broader movements that are global, that are transnational, whether we're talking about negritude, Pan-Africanism. I'm especially thinking, he produces the series the same year C.L.R. James writes the book, The Black Jacobins. And C.L.R. James is a well-known Trinidadian writer who writes this book that focuses as well on sort of the life of Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution through the lens of Toussaint Louverture. So they both trying to create, show these narratives that reflect this history that I think go back to what you said at the very beginning, Petrouchka, sort of the significance of Black leadership, and particularly in this moment where Trinidad is dealing with the reality of its colonialism, where you have a Jim Crow in the US, but you also have the formation of these, so to speak, cultural meccas in places like Chicago and New York in the North, but also you could argue in the urban South as well. So I think it's very important to sort of situate these works within that historical moment and within the sort of very exciting moment of cultural production that relates to Black leadership and perhaps to a sense cosmopolitanism.
Well, I've decided we simply cannot do happy half hours. We do happy hours. There's just always so much to talk about with these. So I want to thank Fredo and I want to thank Petrouchka. This was just wonderful. It made me sit and look again at these terrific prints, which I have studied a lot when they were up in the museum, but just spending more time with them. And it really, I'm just compelled to hope that we can find the remaining two. So we have a complete set one of these days. But having these is a joy, and we encourage all of you, once you are able to come back to campus, to visit them and look at them and study them and enjoy them, because they are here at the college for now into the future, and they're all of ours to enjoy. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a great weekend.
thank you.
Ciao.